This is 𝗕ន់populi, podcast for the people.
Hey, good afternoon, Bob. Good to have you on the Born or Made podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, look forward to this one. So I always like to start off kind of light here. So where am I speaking to you from today?
Where are you speaking to me from?
Where are you at right now?
You're in Boca Raton?
No, you are.
I am on, I'm in the Kawartha Lakes in southern Ontario, probably 115 or 20 miles northeast of Toronto.
Wow.
On a lake called Stony Lake.
Wow. So you've got to be we're getting 50-degree weather down in Virginia where I live. I'm obviously not talking to you there. I'm in Boca, but so what kind of temperature are you getting up there right now?
It's actually perfect. It's in the mid 70s, clear sky, the cloud floating around, and no humidity. It's an excellent day. That's what it is.
Hence why you live there.
What did you say?
I said, that's why you live there, right?
Well, it's a good place to be right now. It's one of the worst springs anybody can ever remember. But that for me followed being in Florida from early November through to for 4 or 5 months. And it was the worst weather anybody that I know there could ever remember seeing several months in a row. 4 or 5 days of rain every week. And then a bit of sunshine, but a lot of water. And the same thing happened here.
Really?
And it stopped about a month ago. It didn't stop totally, but the weather shifted to what passes for summer.
Wow.
And it's nice. Right now, it's great. So the rest of this week, I'll probably go to the golf course every day and start hitting a lot of golf balls because I need the exercise.
Yeah, well, good. I can't wait to talk about that. So so tell me, so where did you start off your life at? Where are you, what part of the United States are you from originally?
Actually, I'm a Canadian.
You are
Canadian
Canadian.
citizen.
Okay.
I was born in Toronto, as was my brother Neil.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived in a little town when we were kids from about late 47, early 1948. A little town called Omemee, Omemee. It's from where I am right now, it's probably 35 miles from where I am. And a great little place. It was about 400 people with a river running through it, a mill, and a mill dam. It was a classic little village. It has its own mill. The local farmers brought their grain in there to have it milled. It had a local creamery and mixed farming. So milk went into the creamery, and it came back as milk, cream, cheese, butter, whatever, and it was delivered locally. And the pond above the mill dam was loaded with fish. So we always had fresh fish. And everybody, was out there in the hunting season trying to shoot a duck or something. I did that. I don't do it anymore. I don't really want to kill anything. And but that was it. That's where I grew up. That's a great memory, and I'm close to that area of the province right now.
Now, is that still a very small town?
The small town. My brother did a live streamed concert from a concert hall in Omemee a few years ago. It was, I think it was globally live streamed from there. And it was very well received. We've got a long history there. My father, when we lived there when we were kids, my father wrote a lot of books and was well known in Canada. He did the Hockey Night in Canada intermissions, televised intermissions between periods of the National Hockey League games out of Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. So he was, when television came along in the early 50s, all those hockey games were broadcast immediately because it had a huge audience, commercially viable thing. And prior to that, it was all the games were broadcast on the radio, play-by-play by Foster Hewitt and his son Bill. So, yeah, that was the atmosphere that my brother and I grew up in for several years. And, those memories last a long time. It was good. It still is. It's really a pretty part of the province. The way that little village functioned when we were kids has definitely changed a lot. The mill is no longer there. The dam is there, though, and it was rebuilt. And instead of being made out of wood, it's now concrete and steel. And the bridge across the river below it was replaced. And the mill itself is no longer there. The creamery where all the local farmers took their stuff is gone. There was a town freezer where, anything you wanted frozen from the farms, beef, pork, lamb, probably, it was all frozen there. And you could go to the town freezer and retrieve what you needed. And then when refrigeration came along, everybody got a refrigerator. Prior to that, there'd be a block of ice delivered about once a week. A big block of ice would come in. My mother would put it in the top of the refrigerator. That was refrigeration. So, by today's standards, it's primitive. I mentioned that to people now who are, even 20 years younger than I am, and they have no recollection of that because it didn't exist when they were kids. But I grew up watching that, and it was real. I mean, we were, everybody went hunting, fishing. There was even, when I was a kid, there was a trapper who trapped whatever that was wandering around, probably rabbits, raccoons. What else would there be? But that was our the atmosphere around Omemia, Ontario. Is I hear it reflected in my brother's songs. I notice it every once in a while. I hear something in there. I think that's where that came from. Those childhood memories.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, it sounds like an amazing place growing up like that. I mean, being able to, have that kind of, childhood. Do you still know a lot of the same people that you grew up around? I mean, obviously.
well, some of them. I
Yeah,
mean, most of them are deceased.
right.
But that's it. I mean, we had I knew a lot of people in that little village, and one guy that I went to school with is still around, but I can't think of there's one other person, but basically they're all deceased,
But
as are most of the people that I played a lot of golf with when I was a kid playing golf in Ontario. And then I started playing professional golf. I played a lot of amateur competition when I was a teenager. And then that just expanded into joining the Canadian PGA and playing. I like to play the game. I didn't particularly have any interest in working in a pro shop, selling golf balls, golf clubs, shoes, and the rest of this stuff. Playing the game was what intrigued me. How do you make the little ball go from where it is to where you want it to be next? That's the objective. It
so
still is.
when you were a kid, I mean, when did your interest in golf start and how?
I was maybe 11 or 12. We moved from Omemie to an area in Pickering, Ontario, which was and still is there. It's I'd say 15 miles, roughly 15, 20 miles east of Toronto on the north side of Lake Ontario. And we lived the Brock Road, and across the road was a golf course. Right across the road, directly. I could walk out the front door across the road and wind up on the fourth tee of the golf course, and it might take me 60 seconds to get there. So that was it. And the golf pro was a guy, his name was Wilson Patterson, and Wilson was a teacher and and a golf pro. And so occasionally, and when he was giving lessons, I'd be employed to pick up the golf balls that the student was hitting. And I made a little bit of money doing that. But I lived on the golf course. And I went to school, high school. That's where I started high school, was in Pickering. And several of the teachers there played golf, so I played golf with them too. And it was a good one. I was by there recently. It's all built up now. The only way I could figure out where our house used to be was by finding a hydroelectric tower that was right across the road from the house. And I located it, and then I knew I could tell where the house used to be. Now it was
Really?
a two-lane, now it's four lanes, and there's shopping centers and tract housing developments and so on. It's looks like a lot of other places do. Look, being a suburb of Buffalo, it doesn't, the places don't look any different.
Yeah, it's like I grew up
Just
in Austin, Texas, and I can't even find my house. There's now a 8-lane super highway going through there within about 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile from my original house. I'd have never. We used to shoot rabbits on that. It was a dirt road. It's amazing.
well, those childhood situations sometimes have a huge effect on you. And I did, that's where I started playing golf at any rate, was across this, was in Pickering. And then I just kept playing. And I eventually, out of playing competitive golf, amateur tournaments, I met this fellow, Mo Norman. Murray Norman is his actual name. He was from Kitchener, Ontario. And he became known as the finest striker of a golf ball in the game. The professionals out in the tours, the PGA Tour and other tours, they know who he is. And he was compared equally with Ben Hogan as a striker of golf balls. And Mo and I had private practice area in Florida, and people off the PGA Tour who knew how to find us would occasionally show up. And it was interesting. I hit a lot of golf balls with Mo, hundreds of thousands of golf balls. So I eventually I figured out how to hit it so it went where I wanted it to go. And I still know, I still understand it. And a lot of what that is in that book that I wrote called Mind Golf. The subtitle is The Troubled Genius of Mo Norman.
Oh, really?
He was, yeah, he had that talent. He hit God knows how many golf balls, probably a couple of million. But in the space of 4 or 5 years, I hit hundreds of thousands of golf balls with him. We get up every morning, meet, hit balls, go to another golf course and chip and putt and play 9 holes in the afternoon with 3 or 4 balls a hole. And we did that all winter long in the New Smyrna Beach area of Florida, which is just south of Daytona on the Atlantic coast. And then back in Ontario, we did a lot of the same thing and played a lot of competition. And we played tournaments in the North Florida PGA Tour. It was good. I got really good at it. And it got interrupted by a legal proceeding I was in Canada in the early 80s that extended for a long time. Speaking of writing, I'm going to write something about it. I was looking at some of the stuff earlier today. I started writing something years ago called The Marked Man. I'll have to read it and see what I wrote. I don't remember exactly. The gist of it I remember, but that's it. But it was, I got to the point hitting golf balls where I think it was 1981 or 82. We had this practice area private in a little place called Oak Hill, Florida, just south of New Smyrna Beach, a few miles down US 1. And Mo was watching what I was doing, and he looked at me and he said, "Bob, you're the closest in the game to Ben Hogan." I was surprised by that comment, but I was extremely accurate. I could hit anything. I knew where the ball was going to go. I remember now what I did. Now my grasp of the technique is more refined than it was when I did it. Because
Really?
yeah, it has to do with, directly has to do with creating the image of the shot to be, and then knowing how to channel, direct energy into what you feel so that it is released into the image when the face of the club picks up the ball and in effect slings it into the flight line. Do you ever play any golf?
Yes,
Do you
sir.
play golf?
Yes, sir, I do. I'm not any good, but I love to play golf. Yes, sir.
Well, 𝗕cie𝗿𝗁𝘁 friend, um, ask her about this. He was talking to me one day. He's a jeweler, and he said, "What do you think I should do?" And I said, "Well, when you're on the golf course," and he plays maybe a couple of times a week and was shooting the low 90s. So I said, when you're out there the next time, the ball's sitting in front of you. In your mind, put it precisely where you want it to be next, and then look up in the air, and you will sense where the ball has to go into free fall. You'll find the apex of the flight
Mm-hmm.
where the ball goes to free fall and lands on the destination point that you've picked out. So put the ball at the destination point, look up in the air until you sense the apex, and then come back along that line to the apex, and you'll feel it. And then just go through the motion and try to deliver the head of the club. Imagine the ball stuck on the face of the club, and you're going to sling it into that flight line. Don't hit it, sling it. Keep you from attacking it with your hands, which is what most people do. And he went out not long after that, and he made 4 birdies and he shot 80 by doing
Wow.
what I just said. And he said, and I said, well, he said, but I've never been able to do it since. And I said, well, were you trying to figure out what made it work? And he said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And I said, don't do that. Just do what you were doing, and it'll keep working. I haven't talked to him for a while, so I'm not sure what he's doing now. But
Yeah, we all try to overthink it,
um,
right? I mean, that's the problem.
a lot of people do. A lot of people, you can watch them on television. They're thinking. You have to feel it. And the feeling emanates from the creation of the thought to be, of the shot to be. It's directly related to the power in the creation of thought. That's what it actually is. There was never anything else.
I've
And
never,
it's that technique that I just outlined. That's portable to other areas of endeavor. You can, I use it playing the piano or the guitar. I get the thought of what I want to play, the lyric of the song, for instance, until I got the whole thing in my mind, and I can feel it. And when that feeling shows up, it drives the action. It's the dynamic that runs the show. Once you find out how to get them attached to that dynamic, the dynamic, in my view, when I watch accomplished performers perform, whatever they're doing, they can be musicians on a big stage. Um, they get a hold of the dynamic of that performance and they keep it. They never lose track of the dynamic. And the audience picks up the energy, and the response is gratifying to whoever's creating it, creating that kind of response from the audience. So if you want a really good result from what you're doing, it's that technique is very useful. You have to
it's
create the image of
it's
what you want to have
interesting.
happen and then let it happen.
You
Feel
could,
it.
yeah, you could apply that to all facets of life too. I was sitting there listening to you say that, and I was listening about the performer and the piano. But I mean, you could do that in business. I mean, you could do it anything. I mean, you could really do it if you just took the time to take the effort to do that.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that's exactly it. I've been watching last week. I was watching along with my brother. My brother and sister-in-law are up here, so we're watching the Democratic National Convention,
Mm-hmm.
listening to all of that. And I remember sitting there watching, listening, and thinking, somebody who's got that vision of what they want to accomplish and can feel it, and it's planted securely in there, that energy of creating that is what I'm talking about. I'll be interested, very interested, to see what transpires from here into election day and what happens after that too. Obviously, I think I think Kamala Harris is on the right track with what she's talking about. it'll be interesting to watch what transpires if she's elected. If Donald Trump's elected, it'll be equally interesting to watch what he does.
Well, it is, because I was watching I just watch the highlights. I try to stay out of as much as I can because I get exhausted, as you can imagine. You're up there watching it down here. You're probably saying the same thing. But their message was very positive, and it applies to what you're thinking about. I mean, if you, it's simple, right? You apply negative all the time, you're probably going to end up with negative results. If you apply positive, you're going to probably end up with a positive result. And that's just life in general, right? And that's what you were talking about. Their messaging was extremely positive. And so I think you can apply that to life, like you were talking about the shot. I mean, if you think about it, you just apply that to anything in general. And I'd put pretty big high wages on it, as you would too, that if you go in with a positive attitude and a positive vision, you're probably going to end up with a positive result.
You're far more likely to get a positive result with that approach than you are if you're negative about it and critical of what other people are doing, and you get lost in pointing and attacking things. Sometimes I think these politicians get up in the morning and they say, "What's our adversary doing today that we can attack?" Mm-hmm. So that's what you wind up listening to, and it doesn't work. You can't sell that forever either. But you can certainly project things that are positive, as you point out, and it's got a good chance of succeeding. So I'd say the power in the creation of thought is very powerful. And when it comes to the game of golf, I hit this past summer, and when I was in Florida, I hit a lot of putts on the putting green. Mm-hmm. As I was building this putt, in my mind, I put the ball in the cup. But I also, in my mind, I see it rolling. I see the hole intercepting the ball. I see the ball actually rolling past the cup, right over the middle of it, so that the force of the blow will deliver the ball the right distance. If you ever watch golf tournaments, you see a lot of putts right on line short of the cup. Uh-huh. There's a reason for that, because the person hitting the ball, their attention is on the near side of the cup. That's obvious. You stand there and look at it, you see the near side of the hole, you're trying to hit the ball the right distance. Where you're looking actually was in the near side of the cup, not the far side. So if you see the roll of the putt, I look at it, in my mind, the ball's in the hole. How did it get there? I let my mind tell me, and I feel it, and I go with what comes into my mind. That's exactly it. I did it the other day, and I sunk a couple of putts from about 35 feet. I don't even get it down on the ground and line it up. I might look at the general contour of the green. You can't miss that. But the technique that I'm using is very similar to a full shot that you hit with a driver. Just put the ball at the destination point. The shot gets built from the destination point back to where you are. One thing Mo Norman said late in his life was, this game should be taught from the green back to the tee. But that was a reason. Learn how to putt. And then once you figure out what is really going on, the principles of it, mental and physical, are applicable to any other club in the bag. It doesn't matter what it is, a tee shot or a 30-yard wedge shot. You're putting the ball at the destination point, and you feel that the motion you get. If you did it and kept trying to do it, when it happens, you'll know that it feels right, and the ball will do what you want it to do. Just keep doing that. If you can do it once, you can do it twice, and so on. It comes and goes, but generally speaking, it's a useful way to try to play the game. Mo Norman said the average golfer has two things in mind: hope and fear. And that's true. They hope to go down the fairway, but they're also looking at the alligators over there in that swamp. And sometimes the ball goes there too. Quite often it does.
It's so funny, right? It's like you hit how many shots, and there's no water in front of you, and you never hit it in that spot. You put water in front of it, and what do? You hit it in that water because you visualize it hitting that. It's funny because it's like, right, there's the guy down there that's 200 yards to the right, and he's in a golf cart. And you're supposed to hit it 200 yards, 250 yards to the left down the middle of the fairway. But you always hit it at the guy at the cart. So it's exactly what you're saying is you're visualizing that, and what's the result? You hit it in the water, or you hit it at the guy in the golf cart.
Yeah. Well, somebody, a wise person once says, where your attention is, there are you.
Yeah.
So a lot of people walk up in the tee at the golf course, they see the trouble. That's where their attention went. I don't want to go there. There's snakes over there, or there's alligators, or there's water, or there's swamp, there's whatever it is. It's not the middle of the fairway. You look at precisely where you want the ball to go. Never mind the rest of it. It's there anyhow. It's a mental, it's a mental game. You can play it with yourself every time when you go to the golf course. And then you can take it, as you point out, as portable to other things too. You could do it with what you're doing interviews with people. Where do I want this to go? It depends on who you're talking to,
Mm-hmm.
what their reason for being on your show is. But that's, to me, what it is, the theater of the situation. I've been asked to do a podcast. It's been suggested to me. And I may start doing that. But as I think about it, I think of the theater of it. What will the people watching it see?
Mm-hmm.
What vibe will they get from it? And how do you create that? That was the first thing I thought of. My brother said, you should do a podcast about all this stuff you're involved in. And, but that's, there you are. I could do that. That's probably what I will do. Sort of an interesting idea. I've never done anything like that. I have no problem.
Yeah, I think you'd be great, especially
talking to people.
Yeah, especially talking about this mind thing and everything, which is, as you and I know, is the biggest culprit we have for good and bad in our lives is our darn minds. And I think it's actually an interesting idea. Everything you're saying, you're applying to golf, which I love. But then I'm sitting here the whole time trying to think about how I can apply those same things in my business and all the other things that I do. It's like driving. We always say, you go where you're looking, right? So when we're driving these cars, you're never looking 20 yards. I'm looking 200 yards, because if I'm looking 200 yards, I don't even see what I went past. I always go to that spot. And it's the same thing when you're applying it to golf and life in general. I think that's a great concept.
Yeah. I know the guy that used to drive my brother's tour bus, Joe McKenna. We were floating along someplace one day, and the road had a lot of twists and turns. And I said, Joe, what are you looking at down there? He said, I look away out there, and the things in close take care of themselves. That's what his response was. I use that idea driving a car. I look away out there. The things that are in close, your vision picks up on them, and you instinctively respond. I noticed that too. It's interesting. And it's, with all the golf I've played, and the other thing I'm interested in is writing. I like to write. And, as I said, I have other things in mind that I want to write about, and I'll use that principle. I wrote something recently about that. But what I'm getting to is, when I want to write something, what I need to find is the starting point. The conclusion, I can see it. Once I know the conclusion that I want to describe or come to the surface out of the writing. It's what is the launching point that gets to that. Once I have the starting point in my mind and I'm comfortable with it, I just start, and the story tells itself. It gets to the destination point by itself. It's the same thing I was talking about with, put the golf ball at the destination point, find the apex where the ball goes into free fall, feel it and let it happen. Don't argue with it.
Well, you hear these guys on TV, these commentators, right? They're always sitting in there. I was thinking about this too when you're talking about putting. And I was thinking about life again. So, all you hear them, they're visualizing the shot. You never hear them say that when they're on the putting green. But yet it's the same darn principle. But you never hear them talk about that. I just thought that was interesting when you said that, because you never hear them say that, because you talked about them being short and you said because they're looking on this side of the hole. And I thought, well, yeah, that makes sense based on the way you were talking about it. And I never heard it quite described like that. And I was like, well, that makes total sense to me.
Yeah, I've never heard it described in television that way either. I'd like to see a statistic on the number of putts on line and short of the cup in a normal weekly PGA Tour tournament. That's a statistic you never hear. And those guys, there isn't a statistic that they don't use that they think of.
Absolutely.
They haven't thought of that one yet.
No.
And they talk about the apex, they measure it. You see it on the
absolutely.
screen. Somebody
that's the new
going,
that's the new thing now.
And the apex is 180 feet up in the air, but they don't discuss what I talk about with regard to the apex. Van Hogen had 3 lines of irons that his company, Van Hogen Golf, I guess it was called, made. Producer, director, and apex. Those were the 3 lines of irons.
Really?
Producer, director, and apex. So you're the producer of this. You're the director of it. And the apex is the catalyst. Recognition of the apex is the thing that shows you the image of the shot to be. Try it yourself. Go out in a golf course, put the ball at the destination point, then look up and find the apex, and your mind will show you the flight of the shot. I remember talking to Mo Norman about this one day, and he said, Bob, a good thought that not many people know is this. Imagine the ball stuck on the face of the club and you're going to sling it into the flight line. That'll make you start swinging from the ground up. Your lower body will start carrying the action. You wind up, you turn away from it, and your lower body leads.
But you never hear the word
up through your left foot.
But you never hear the word sling ever. And I think that's interesting, because as soon as you said that too, that was another visual for me that made sense.
Yeah. Well, the motion of the golf course, or the golf swing, is essentially somebody described it as energize, stabilize, contain, release. I've forgotten who said that. It might have been 𝗕tože. At any rate, the idea of the ball being stuck in the face of the club was, I think, something that Lee Trevino knew. And Mo knew Lee Trevino, and they talk once in a while. Once we went somewhere, the hell was it? Jacksonville, Florida, where the PGA Tour has a flagship course up there in Ponte Vedra, south of Jacksonville on the beach side. And we went up there and parked the car across the road where there's this other practice fairway, and Trevino and Severino Ballesteros were there hitting balls. So that's who we talked to. I watched Ballesteros hit some. He hit them long. I said to Trevino, I said, man, he hits it a long way. And Trevino says, laugh. He said, yeah, but where? he did it to needle Ballesteros. But it's interesting listening to people who are really good at something talk about what makes it work. So I hit, Mo Norman and I were friends, and we talked openly about all of it. I mean, what does make this work, right?
So
very interesting conversation.
How old were you when you met Mo?
I was probably in my late teens. He was 12 years older than me. And let me think. I've forgotten how old he was when he became a professional. The circumstances around him becoming a professional were publicized a bit. The amateur rules meant you could play the tournaments and you could win prizes, but you couldn't sell them for money. Well, Mo didn't have any money. He would hitchhike to golf tournaments. He didn't have any cash. But he had stuff. He won stuff all over the television sets. He said to me one day, he said, we had 5 or 6 television sets in our family home in Kitchener. And he'd have 5 or 6 watches on one arm. So do you want to know what time it is in Australia or Bangkok or somewhere? And he'd have them all timed out. But he had all these watches, and then, then there'd be 2 less of them someday. And so eventually the amateur body, I've forgotten whether it was the Royal Canadian Golf Association or the Ontario Golf Association, busted him for selling his prizes. And so technically you're a professional. So he couldn't play the amateur tournaments anymore. But he played the professional tournaments. And he was a very unusual person. No social skills and not articulate at all. And but I got along with him fine. I always, basically treated him as an equal. I didn't exclude him. In Florida, we'd meet and have dinner here or there. I arranged for him to stay at a friend's house in 𝗕ecie Beach one winter. And it was good, really good. And he appreciated that kind of consideration of his existence, which is what I did. And he was extremely, he was sincerely, he watched what I was doing. He knew that I was trying to become a really good striker of golf balls. So whenever he saw something that or thought of something that was beneficial to me, he'd tell me. One day when we were hitting balls, and I said, Mo, what's in your mind right before you hit the ball, before the swing starts? And he looked at me and he said, well, I said, what do you do right before you hit the ball mentally? He says, you have to make the chosen line of aim, which is what I eventually called the image of the shot to be. But that's what he was doing. Mentally, he created the shot that he wanted to see. And in his mind, he'd imagine a set of railroad tracks, and the face of the club would go down, precisely down the middle of the tracks. And the ball would go there, straight. Mo could hit the ball straight. What's wrong with straight? He used to say. Nothing's wrong with it. But when he learned at the end of his career, near the end of his existence, actually, we'd meet at 𝗕cie Beach Golf Club at the municipal course there. And I had, for some reason, one day I was out hitting balls and I created the apex. And for some reason or other, I balanced myself for the apex fall line. And it made a difference. It tightened the wind up, increased the club head speed. The ball went farther, and if anything, I was more accurate. And it was easy. So I mentioned it to Mo. And I said, listen to this. And I told him what I was doing. He said, that's interesting. No way, he'd go down to Titusville, the Royal Oak Golf Club, which the Canadian PGA owned, and play his 9 holes and play 3 or 4 balls a hole. And a couple of days later, he came back and he said, I got to show you this. So we got a pail of golf balls and went out to the practice fairway. He never hit range balls, but that day he did. The range balls aren't up to the level of a bag of nice new Titleists. They just don't function the same way. So we went out to the practice fairway, and all these people are there. They recognized him, and they knew me, and they knew that he and I played golf together a lot. So they all scattered to the other end of the practice tee, but they stood there and watched. And I said, he said, I got to show you this. I said, what? And he said, what you told me. I'm going to show you what I did. So he did. And he was hitting, he could hit the ball in any trajectory that he chose, straight. But that day, he was hitting high and low, fades and draws with every club in the bag. He never did that. But he was balanced for the apex fall line. And I had explained it to him when I told him that. I said, look, I don't know why this works, but it does. And he looked at me, he said, after he hit all these shots, and he looked at me and he said, all my life wrong. And I said, you weren't wrong. You just never thought of it this way. Neither did I, or I would have said something, but it works and it does. So I turn away from the apex fall line and the muscles in my left leg, the line of balance up through my left heel is related to the apex fall line. I plant it. In my right leg, what I feel is the end of the orbit of the motion. When I put my hands on the club, I sense where the sweet spot is. Bounce the ball on the head of the club and you'll know precisely where it is because the ball bounces away from it. You'll hear the difference and you'll see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know hell where it was. In my grip, I could feel, I knew where it was. That's what I put behind the ball when I addressed the ball. And that's what I was swinging was the apex, towards the sweet spot of the club. So I'm turning away from the apex. And in my right side, you're winding up. You're winding, you're not swaying back and forth, you wind up. The revolving action constituted of wind up and release. When the swing changes direction, you're moving a right-handed player into your left side. Your lower body leads. There's an arc in your left side, so the top of your head essentially is the top of the left side line of balance. When you turn away from the shot, you turn away, you wind up, and the torque develops, and the lower part of your body changes the direction of the swing. That's obvious when you watch somebody who knows what they're doing or has a good swing. Yeah, so that all by itself, a change in direction, is integral to what transpires. You flow into this. I'd imagine the ball stuck in the face of the club and wind up. The swing changes direction. I can feel it from the ground up, but I'm letting the sweet spot, when I know where the apex is because I've established it, I see the whole shot. When my eye find the apex, I see the whole shot. My eyes come back to where I am, and then I turn away from it and let it happen. But in my right side, when I plant my right leg, the feeling in my right leg is where I'm going with my right side. The sweet spot of the club gets to the end of the orbit of the motion. You'll sense where that is. But look at the apex and see it and feel the whole shot. You get a sense of where the end of the swing is. Eventually, what I did was I could walk up to the shot, I'd look at it, I'd see the apex, and my eyes would come back, and I'd sense where the end of the orbit was. I was starting to turn away from the end of the orbit, not from the apex fall line. I did that until I couldn't spend as much time hitting balls as I wanted to. But that's as far as I got with it. I was turning away from the end of the orbit, knowing that all I had to do was go through a motion that got back to the end of the orbit that I'd sensed, and the ball had to go where I wanted it to. It couldn't go anywhere else. And it does. When I do that, the ball goes where I want it to. It never doesn't.
So did you have to go through this mental gyration for just like ball after ball after ball to make that work, where it just became repetitive? You and just muscle memory or whatever you want to call it?
No, I didn't know all that and then go there and try to practice it.
Right.
Now, because what I just said, I can go to the practice where I'm aware of what I just said. What I did initially in this little field in Oak Hill where Mo and I had this private place to hit balls, there were the only other things in that field were about half a dozen huge Brahma bulls. You've seen those things? They're big,
yeah. Oh, yes, sir.
Big. It took them a while to get used to us, but they did. Eventually, they realized we were going to cause them any trouble. But initially, it was not. The bulls were not happy to see us. They look at us. You get a millimeter too close, and they're pawing the ground and snorting, and they're huge.
Oh yeah.
However, we did get to know them, and when we'd show up, they go to the other end of the field, stay away from us when we went out to pick up the golf balls. After they realized what we were doing, it was fine. But when I started to get control of what was going on, really good control, I hit tee shots. And when I hit, a perfect tee shot, I know where in that field the ball would wind up. So I'd go out there and I hit. And when I hit one where I wanted it to, every shot I hit after that, I was extended in my mind 3 to 5 feet. When I started to do that, I kept doing it for a month. I'd extend my image of where the ball was going to go by another 3 to 5 feet every day. At the end of a month, I was hitting the ball 15 to 20 yards farther average off the tee and accurately. So I was a club to a club and a half or a club and something closer to the green on the golf course. That means it's easier to get it closer to the hole and score better. And so I did that. And I could see now I'll do the same thing. I'll go out there and hit it until I know that I'm hitting it the right way. And then I'll extend it a certain amount every day mentally and just keep adding to it because I know it works because I've done it already. And it's just totally a mental construct. When I did that, I was not aware of trying to hit the ball harder or farther or anything else. I just created the image and let the energy that I'd amassed flow into it. That was it. It was that simple.
Wow.
As Mo used to say once in a while, it's so simple.
Yeah.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
And he hit the thing, another 260 or 70-yard tee shot straight as an arrow. He could do that with any club. Didn't matter what it was. He hit it straight.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so cool. Well, this thing flew fast. We were already at the end of our topics here and look forward to, we're going to have to do this again because I kind of want to expand a little more on this mental thing. This is pretty intriguing. I'm going to get your book and make a point to read it before I talk to you next time, and maybe I'll have a better understanding of it, and maybe I can apply it to some of my business ideas.
I noticed that prior to this discussion, you can mention this to her. 𝗕cie𝗿𝘁 said, you probably shouldn't talk about politics and energy. And I thought, I'm going to talk about it anyhow. I didn't say that to her.
Yeah, we talk whatever we want to.
How can I talk about golf without talking about energy? Because that's what I was doing was accessing energy. And and that goes in a lot of directions.
Absolutely.
The sun shines on the planet. And the energy that causes that to happen comes from somewhere, obviously. So does the solar system. So when you start contemplating things like that, the world gets bigger very quickly.
Yes, it does. Yeah. Yeah. So, and through all this process and everything as we end this, and my final question always is the same, is just do you think through this process of your life and everything, do you think you were born or do you think you were made?
It's funny, when this conversation started, I was going to say to you, what's the best answer you ever got to that question?
I've never got the same answer.
I'm not surprised. I mean, obviously you're born.
Yeah.
However, the design of the existence of a human being a human, an incarnate, it's very interesting. As I mentioned it to 𝗕cie𝗿𝘁. I said, the most of the religious orders, worldwide in our world, agree that God made man in his own image. I said, I agree with that. God made man in his own image. That's a very interesting comment. Something really made man. That's a truth. Yeah. Something made this planet. In my view, it's the same thing, made both of them. That energy created me, and it created this planet Earth, the mountains, the rivers, everything you can see and everything you can't see.
Yep, I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the Born or Made podcast. I'm getting your book, and I'll look forward to talking to you on the next one.
All right, great. Good to talk to you, Larry.
Same here. Thanks. Take care, Bob.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.